in the gleaming lobby of Royal Crescent International Bank, where marble walls reflected the glow of Italian crystal chandeliers, and the scent of fresh orchids lingered in the air. A small, frail black woman stepped inside. She wore a faded wool coat, clutching a thick stack of papers against her chest. Her name was Mildred Hayes. She was 68. No one looked at her. No one wanted to. Amid polished shoes, tailored suits, and tight designer skirts, her worn-out heels and crumpled folder felt like a wrong note in a symphony of privilege. Mildred stopped at the information desk. Her voice was raspy, but steady. "I need to speak with a senior financial manager. I'm here for an investment contract." The young white receptionist frowned, glancing her over as though she'd just crawled out of a gutter. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I believe they'll want to hear this." The sharp click of high heels echoed down the corridor, slicing through the air like judgment. Claire Winfield, tall, blonde, perfectly composed in a beige pencil dress and a Rolex that glinted like ice, strode toward them. Claire was the bank's head of investment, notorious for her ruthless efficiency and her unwavering belief that the world was divided into two kinds of people, those with money and those not worth speaking to. She stopped, tilted her chin at the receptionist. "What's going on here?" she says. "She has an investment contract," the receptionist murmured. Claire smirked, turned to Mildred with a look of amused disgust. "I think you're in the wrong place. This isn't a charity office. We don't serve lowly black folks." A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the lobby. Some people smirked behind their phones. Others looked up from their screens, curious to watch the scene. Mildred didn't flinch. She held out the folder. "I have a $50 million investment proposal. Please, spare me 5 minutes." Claire laughed, a sharp, grating sound. "50 million? Yours?" The old woman nodded, calm, unshaken. This time, the whole lobby turned silent, then erupted in muffled snickers. A man whispered to his wife, "She probably thinks she won the lottery." A young clerk muttered to a colleague, "I know her. Used to mop floors on the 3rd level every morning." Claire folded her arms, her lips curling into a sneer. "You expect me to waste my time on some papers you probably picked out of a trash bin?" And without waiting for an answer, she flicked her wrist. Swoosh! The folder spilled. Papers fluttered across the marble floor, sliding under tables, rustling in the air-conditioned draft. The room hushed for a beat, not out of shame, but anticipation. Phones were raised to record. Claire's voice cut through the quiet, cold as polished steel. "If you have any dignity left, you'll leave while you can still walk out on your own." But Mildred didn't leave. She knelt, slowly. "Wait a second. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us." Deliberately, as if performing a sacred ritual, the old woman gathered every sheet. Her hands, rough with decades of hard work, smoothed each page carefully, stacking them neat again. She didn't speak. She didn't glare. The lobby's golden lights glinted off her small, stooped figure, dwarfed by the towering marble and the smug faces around her. But no one noticed that with every paper she picked up, something unseen had already begun to move. The wheels of justice had started to turn. At the Royal Crescent Bank, Mildred Hayes really was just the black cleaning lady, not for a year or two, but for 30 whole years. She had started back when the bank still used typewriters instead of tablets, when announcements were handwritten, and the receptionists logged visitors' names with purple ink pens. She had seen directors rise and fall, policies signed and tossed away like autumn leaves, walls replaced from chipped plaster to polished glass that reflected the faces of those who worked there. But through all those changes, no one noticed the small woman who wiped every elevator rail with her worn cloth each morning, who sprayed a hint of fresh scent into the conference room before important meetings, and who slipped out quietly every evening without a single goodbye. Her name never hung on an office door. Her voice had never been heard in a meeting. Her presence was like fine dust, only noticed when it was gone. And even though she was there every day, people treated her as if she were nothing more than old furniture. useful, but invisible. 30 years, and no one ever asked what Mildred dreamed of. They only looked down at her from the shine of their expensive shoes. So when she walked in today after months away, wearing the same worn coat and hunched back, the white employees didn't need to ask who she was before bursting into laughter, as if her humble past was a permanent sentence carved into her skin. After Claire Winfield flung her documents across the marble lobby, papers scattering like torn wings under the cold hum of the air conditioning, as Mildred quietly knelt and gathered them one by one, something unusual at Uala. Just as she stood, still brushing dust from the creased contract, a man in a gray suit strode out from the side hallway. He was white, with neatly cut salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes, and pressed lips. A silver name tag glinted on his chest. Russell Ford, executive assistant. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, dipping his head slightly. "The CEO would like to see you in his office." The entire lobby froze. No one understood. No one knew why this man, known for his strictness, had addressed her by name, with respect, when only minutes ago everyone had mocked her as the delusional black janitor. Mildred didn't explain. She simply hugged her papers to her chest, nodded, and followed Ford down the hallway. 5 minutes later, the office door opened. Mildred stepped back out. Her expression didn't change. Her pace was steady, not rushed, not slow. She didn't say a word to anyone. She returned to the basement maintenance room, put on her blue uniform, tied her gray hair back, picked up her mop and bucket, and resumed cleaning the hallways, as if nothing had happened. And that was when unease began to spread through Royal Crescent, like a quiet infection. "Something's up, Bethany," a middle-aged administrator whispered to her coworker. "Didn't she quit months ago?" "No, I think she still works nights, cleaning the vault floors," the other replied, sneering. "She was babbling about an investment contract this morning. Should have just admitted she's back to mopping floors." Bethany snorted. In the cafeteria upstairs, gossip spread fast, and the invisible knives began to sharpen. All week, Mildred became the target of cold stares, mocking laughter, and petty cruelty. Glue smeared on her mop head. Red ink splattered across her uniform and tossed in the men's bathroom. Even a moldy loaf of bread left in her supply closet with a note. "50 million for you, Grandma, enough to eat all year." Mildred didn't react. She kept working, as she had for 3 decades. But the so-called power circle of managers, Claire Winfield, Trevor Collins, and Joseph Lane, turned the pressure up. "Heard she has investment money? Probably from some illegal lottery," Claire sneered. "No, rumor says she conned the old security guard into handing over his pension." Trevor added. "Well, we'd better be careful," Joseph said, smirking. "Trash with money tends to get cocky." While they laughed, one quiet voice rose in that cold crowd, belonging to a young white intern, with bright, earnest eyes. "I think Mrs. Hayes is admirable," said Eva Langston. "She's polite, patient, and she cleans every corner perfectly. I don't understand why you're all treating her like this." Eva was immediately ostracized. No one talked to her at lunch anymore. Emails skipped her inbox. Her evaluation report was lost. Even her direct manager treated her like she didn't exist. But Eva didn't stop. Every morning, she still greeted Mildred. Sometimes she offered her a small loaf of brown bread. She asked how Mildred was doing when the older woman rested near the emergency exit. And Mildred, though spoke little, always smiled back, warm as sunlight at the end of a dark hallway. No one noticed that every time Mildred bent to wipe a tile, she also glanced at stray folders tucked beneath desks. Every time she straightened a misplaced file, her eyes lingered on the numbers printed at the top. And no one, not even Eva, realized that Mildred was quietly watching, quietly collecting something no one expected. The ground floor of the Royal Crescent Bank was unnervingly quiet that noon, as if every sound had been swallowed by the glass walls and the polished marble floor. The faint smell of disinfectant lingered in every breath, while the sharp clicks of white managers' high heels cut through the air like blades. At the end of the hallway, Mrs. Mildred Hayes, still in her faded blue janitor's uniform with the bank's logo, was bent over, scrubbing at an almost invisible stain on the staircase. No one greeted her. No one even looked at her, and if they did, it was with the same dismissive glance one might give a lamppost. But that noon, everything began to shift. A black man in his 50s, wearing a simple khaki jacket and a baseball cap, approached a counter. Calm and polite, he asked to review his mortgage agreement after noticing an unclear fee. The young white receptionist didn't bother to look at him. "Sir," she said flatly, "if you're not qualified to read financial documents, you should hire a lawyer. This is not a place for guesses." The man stayed calm. "I'm not guessing. I just need an explanation. This fee wasn't in the original contract." At that moment, the middle management group entered, led by Claire Winfield. She looked at the man, smirked, and said loud enough for the lobby to hear, "This is an investment bank, not a community legal clinic. We don't have time to explain numbers to random black men who don't belong here." The man clenched his fists but kept his voice steady. "I'm just asking a question." Claire's voice sharpened. "If you insist on causing trouble, I'll call security." The man opened his mouth to respond, but a new voice cut through the marble lobby. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned. Mrs. Mildred stood in the middle of the lobby, mop still dripping water, the sunlight from the glass ceiling catching the sweat on her lined face. Though small, her voice carried clearer than anything else in the hall. "He's asking for transparency. That's a legal right. And you're treating him like he crawled out of a trash heap." Claire's eyes widened. The lobby fell silent. "What did you just say? You a janitor dare lecture me?" "I'm not lecturing anyone," Mildred said evenly. "I'm just doing what's right. If standing up for the truth looks like rebellion to you, then maybe this place never had justice to begin with." Claire let out a loud laugh. "Fine, you and that little intern can pack up your things. You're done here." That little intern was Eva Langston, the young white intern with braided blonde hair, round glasses, and a habit of taking notes with a purple pen. The same Eva who always greeted Mrs. Mildred every morning, who once slipped her a buttered roll when she learned Mildred hadn't eaten, and who now stepped forward, standing between the black customer and the managers. "You don't have the authority to fire me," Eva said, her voice shaking but her gaze firm. "And what you're doing is blatant racial discrimination." Claire's face turned red. "You think you can talk to me about morals? This is a bank, not a charity. We deal in assets, not feelings." "Exactly," Eva shot back. "But if assets come without ethics, they're nothing but dirty numbers." Claire's hand darted for her phone. "I'll call the police. Both of you, the black cleaning lady and the naive white girl, will regret this." The tension was about to snap. Then came the sound of slow, measured footsteps on the marble floor. Everyone turned again. An elderly white man entered the lobby, wearing a navy suit and a neatly folded pocket square. His silver hair caught the light, and his presence alone hushed the room. It was Jonathan Winfield, honorary chairman of Royal Crescent Bank, co-founder of its very first branch, and a living legend in the state's financial world. But what shocked everyone wasn't just his presence. He stopped, looked briefly at Claire, gave Eva a gentle nod, and then his gaze softened as it fell on Mrs. Mildred. "Apologies for being late," Jonathan said warmly. "Is someone giving you trouble, my friend?" Claire choked on her words. Eva's eyes widened. Jonathan turned to the crowd, his voice ringing clear. "I suppose many of you don't know who she is. So let me make it clear. Mrs. Mildred Hayes is not just a cleaning lady, as some of you so rudely call her. She is the second largest shareholder of Royal Crescent Bank, holding a $50 million investment. That money is the result of 30 years of patient, intelligent, and relentless work. For 3 decades, Mildred had lived frugally, spending only on a tiny rented room, tea each morning, and her mother's medicine. Every spare cent went into long-term savings, educational funds, government bonds, and carefully chosen tech stocks. Slowly, steadily, her modest earnings grew until they crossed the 50 million mark. The lobby froze. Claire's mouth hung open, phone still in hand. Jonathan's gaze hardened as he looked around. She never spoke up before, he continued, because she was watching, quietly, taking note, gathering evidence to remove every arrogant, ignorant, racist fool who dares tarnish a bank that claims to serve fairness. Eva stammered, "Grandpa, you knew her." Jonathan smiled gently. "Of course. Years ago, when this bank was just starting, I found her reading a tattered copy of Finance for Beginners while scrubbing the hallway floor. I helped her open her first investment account. The rest, she learned on her own. She didn't just learn to invest, she learned to own her future." Eva turned to Mildred, eyes shining with awe. Mildred smiled softly. "And I didn't know you were his granddaughter. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" The entire lobby remained frozen, stunned. Only two women stood tall, one old, one young, with no need for power or titles, just justice. The next morning, Royal Crescent was no longer the same bank it had been the day before. Even before sunrise, reporters, financial investigators, and officials from the State Financial Bureau crowded outside its glass doors. The emergency summons had come directly from Honorary Chairman Jonathan Winfield himself. When the doors finally opened, the first to step out were not confident executives, but disgraced managers. Heads lowered, faces pale, as if daylight itself had stripped them bare. Claire Winfield, the once arrogant manager who had sneered at Mrs. Mildred Hayes and thrown her investment documents to the floor, was publicly dismissed alongside every mid-level manager involved in racial discrimination, harassment of clients, or workplace manipulation. They were escorted out immediately, denied even the chance to pack their desks, met only by the cold, judgmental stares of the very people they had once looked down on. The news spread like wildfire. Pictures of Claire, hair disheveled, blouse wrinkled, staring blankly as security walked her out, flooded the headlines. Companies across the country issued statements condemning any tolerance for racism or unethical business practices. The same woman who had once commanded meetings now found herself standing at a bus stop, ignored or pitied, her fall from power as public as her cruelty had once been. But that was only the beginning. On the top floor, in the executive boardroom, where portraits of wealthy founders once hung, a new photograph was mounted at the center. It showed Mildred Hayes in her janitor's uniform, mop in hand, sunlight spilling over her small, steady smile. Beneath it, engraved in gold, a symbol of resilience, wisdom, and grace. The entire bank stood and applauded when Mildred was invited to speak at the emergency shareholders meeting. She didn't wear an expensive suit or a corporate badge, just her simple dress, a gray scarf covering her silver hair, and her worn-out shoes. But this time, people rose for her, not for a title but for the values she embodied. Mildred stepped up to the podium, hands trembling slightly. Jonathan watched with a quiet smile, while Eva, no longer just an intern, stood proudly beside her. Eva had been appointed Director of Culture and Internal Development, tasked with building a workplace of transparency, fairness, and respect, where people would no longer be judged by their clothes, but by how they treated those with less power. Royal Crescent began to change from within. Policies were rewritten. Every department underwent ethics and anti-discrimination training. An anonymous reporting system was installed to track abuse of power. Clients who had once been ignored or personally invited back and treated with dignity. The old slogan etched on the lobby glass, "We value the trust of our premium clients," was replaced with a new one, proposed by Mildred and Eva together. "Wealth is not measured by account balances, but by the value you bring to others." Mildred stayed with the bank, not as a cleaner, but as a senior advisor for community outreach. She traveled to other branches, speaking to new employees about the decades she spent invisible, and about the quiet strength it takes to keep believing in decency. One autumn evening, she and Eva walked out of the bank hand in hand. The setting sun turned the glass walls golden, as if to remind everyone that justice might be slow, but it never stays silent forever. In a televised interview later, when asked, "What kept you believing after 30 silent years?" Mildred simply smiled and said, "We should never judge people by the clothes they wear, but by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. And for a brief moment, the entire country seemed to pause just to think about those words. In a world where money often dictates whose voice is heard, Mildred Hayes, a black janitor once dismissed and ridiculed, proved that dignity doesn't come from the clothes you wear, but from the way you dove every single day. She didn't need luxury, nor did she need anyone's favor, only faith, intelligence, and relentless patience. The pennies she saved through sweat and wisdom became a shield of justice, protecting not just herself, but everyone who had been treated as invisible. Mildred's story isn't just a dramatic reversal of prejudice. It's a quiet declaration to the world. Never underestimate the one who watches in silence, because they might just be waiting for the perfect moment to make the whole world stop and listen.